Imagine a creature that grows stronger the longer it lives. An organism whose heart never weakens, whose fertility never wanes, and whose very cells seem to have deleted the code for old age. In the brutal theater of nature, senescence is the only script we all follow except for one unlikely fugitive. You might expect this miracle of longevity to be a microscopic bacterium or a rare forest fungus, but you're more likely to find it on a dinner plate. Meet the common lobster, the glitch in the matrix of biology. It has achieved what emperors and alchemists couldn't for millennia: functional immortality. But don't be fooled. Escaping old age doesn't mean escaping death. In fact, for a lobster, living too long is a death sentence of its own. Here is the dark side of never-ending life. From the moment they hatch until the day they expire, lobsters remain in a state of perpetual expansion. Unlike the vast majority of life forms, their cellular structures do not appear to degrade with time. Their cells continue to replicate without the telltale markers of exhaustion or biological decay. This phenomenon contradicts the core tenets of evolutionary biology. We are taught that every cell ever generated is destined to grow frail and cease functioning, yet the lobster subverts this destiny. How can a crustacean bypass the ravages of time? Why, out of the entire animal kingdom, did the universe select this creature to potentially live indefinitely? And what is the dark reality that awaits a lobster that manages to survive too long? In most sentient beings, the aging process is a hardwired systemic failure. Cells divide, accumulate wear, and eventually lose their utility. Muscles atrophy, vital organs lose their efficiency, and the biological machine slowly grinds to a halt. Consider the case of Scarface, the legendary patriarch of the Masai Mara. In his final days, the lion was a shadow of his former self, slow, brittle, and visibly drained of his vitality. Yet, no one who witnessed his decline could forget the apex predator he once was, a beast credited with neutralizing over 400 hyenas and defeating more than 130 rival lions. That visible deterioration, the fraying of the physical form, is the essence of aging. In stark contrast, a 90-year-old grandfather lobster remains as physically formidable as a young rival. Scientists first noticed this anomaly not through a single specimen, but by observing a persistent pattern. Those studying these crustaceans realized that advanced age did not correlate with physical weakness. On the contrary, older lobsters were frequently more massive, more powerful, and significantly more fertile than their younger counterparts. This observation stood in total opposition to the aging process found in virtually every other animal on the planet. Naturally, the scientific community began to wonder, why do these creatures never seem to slow down? The answer was found at the molecular level. It turns out that lobsters synthesize a specific enzyme known as telomerase. While most animals possess this enzyme, its production typically ceases once they reach maturity, signaling the start of their biological decline. Lobsters, however, continue to produce telomerase throughout their entire lives. Consider the protective plastic aglets found at the ends of shoelaces. In a biological sense, these are telomeres located at the tips of DNA strands. Every time a normal cell replicates, these tips shorten. Once they vanish, the DNA begins to unravel, leading to cellular damage and death. Telomerase acts as a restorative agent, keeping these tips perfectly intact. This allows lobster cells to divide with flawless efficiency, avoiding the slow march towards systemic failure. In laboratory settings, research has confirmed that lobster tissue displays almost no signs of chronological aging, regardless of the specimen's age. This has led to the popular, though slightly inaccurate, claim that lobsters are immortal. While they are not truly undying, the concept is rooted in a fascinating reality. Their fertility never wanes, their organs do not fail, and they are immune to the age-related pathologies that plague mammals. Theoretically, if you were to eliminate predators, environmental toxins, and the demand for seafood dinners, a lobster could exist forever. So, what eventually causes their demise if old age is not the culprit? The answer is a cruel irony. Lobsters are ultimately betrayed by their own continuous growth. They possess a rigid, external suit of armor, known as an exoskeleton. This structure provides essential protection against the hazards of the ocean, but it has one fatal flaw. The shell itself is dead tissue. It cannot grow alongside the lobster to increase in size. The lobster must undergo molting, a high-stakes process where it sheds its current shell to grow a larger one. Molting is akin to struggling out of an incredibly tight suit to reveal a more spacious version underneath. However, as lobsters become older and more massive, this task becomes exponentially more taxing. Their shells grow increasingly thick and heavy, requiring immense strength to break free. If a lobster lacks the necessary energy to complete a molt, it becomes a prisoner within its own calcified armor. Trapped and exhausted, it becomes a target for infection or predation. Furthermore, the act of molting is a massive drain on the creature's metabolic reserves. Curiously, this dangerous molting phase is also the only window during which lobsters can reproduce. During this period, the male transfers genetic material to the female, which she can store for several months. She remains in a protective den for up to a fortnight while her new armor hardens. Once she is secure, she departs, and within a year she may release up to 100,000 eggs without a nest for protection. This cloud of life is largely consumed by the ocean. Fewer than 1% of these offspring will survive the journey to adulthood. The scale of this growth is difficult for the human mind to grasp. A 50-year-old specimen can reach a length of 70 centimeters and a weight exceeding 20 pounds, roughly 1,000,000 times heavier than its weight at birth. To appreciate the absurdity of this, imagine a human infant born at 20 inches. If humans shared the lobster's growth rate, by age 50, a person would stand nearly 1,000 feet tall and weigh 3,000 tons, surpassing the mass of a large aircraft. Sustaining such a colossal frame would be physically impossible. This is precisely the wall that lobsters eventually hit. At a certain point, their sheer volume becomes an unsustainable liability. Molting, the very process required for their continued existence, becomes too risky and exhausting to perform. They do not age out in the traditional sense. Rather, they max out. They are eventually killed by a slow, creeping loss of metabolic function. Their molting cycles grow longer and less frequent as they age. A young lobster might molt several times annually, but a century-old giant may take years to prepare for a single transition. When the energy demands of shedding the shell finally exceed the lobster's capacity, the system stalls. The creature becomes stuck at the threshold of the process, too depleted to move forward. Without the renewal of a fresh shell, they become susceptible to shell disease and internal organ strain, ailments that never troubled them during their prime. Their biology remains ready to persist, but the physical infrastructure required to support that life eventually collapses. History has recorded several rare outliers of this process. The largest specimen on record was captured near Nova Scotia in 1977, weighing a staggering 44.4 pounds and measuring over 3 feet in length. Scientists estimated the creature was at least a century old. Another famous example is George, a lobster believed to be 140 years old. While George was eventually returned to the sea following public intervention, biologists noted that his massive size indicated he was likely approaching the end of his natural capability. Ultimately, the lobster's immortality is a lesson in the limits of physics. They do not die because their cells give up. They die because the rules of the physical world eventually set a ceiling on their never-ending expansion. In the wild, the average life expectancy is approximately 31 years for males and 54 years for females. They are remarkable survivors, but they are still bound by a singular, unavoidable decree of the deep. If you lose the ability to change, you lose the ability to live.